Hello everyone, my name is Barbara and I would like to welcome you all to our latest Novedge webinar episode number 201. This week, it's all about project sharing in Vectorworks. In this webinar, you will learn how to choose between breaking up a project, referencing and project sharing, how to create references, how to decide responsibilities for referencing, the pros and cons of using referencing, and the pros and cons of project sharing. And many more tips and tricks for this great tools from Vectorworks. And today's presenter, Jonathan Pickup, is an architect trained in New Zealand and in the UK with more than 30 years experience. He has been writing and producing Vectorworks manuals and providing customer support for over 15 years. His company, ArchonCAD, is the premier provider of third-party manuals and training resources for Vectorworks. Check it out at archoncad.com. Jonathan also runs the Vectorworks online user group and provides its main direction. So before we get going, here's an overview of what we do at Novedge. We offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's needs. And you can find us at novedge.com, and especially now we have a few special running for what Vectorworks. For instance, for new users of Vectorworks, you can buy one Vectorworks and DSS, and you get a free copy of Bluebeam Review Standards. Also, for users not currently on Service Select program, you can get an upgrade with a 50% discount, and also you will get a 50% off a one-year membership to Vectorworks Service Select. So big things happening. Just visit Novedge, click the orange tab that says promotions, and they're all there for you. But you know, they're limited, so I think one runs to the end of June. Don't miss them. Coming up next week, CFD and FEM simulations on the cloud. Last but not least, today's webinar is free and it's being recorded live. So if you want to rewatch this or any other webinar episode in our collection of 201 after today, just head on over to Novedge's YouTube or Vimeo channels. And now I will pass the microphone and screen to Jonathan, who's ready, and he has great news for you. So take it away, Jonathan.
Thank you, Barbara. Thanks for that introduction. So what I've made for you guys today, I don't know if you can all see it, but on your GoToMeeting control panel, there's an area called Handouts. And what I've created is a simple handout to help you understand some of the things we're going through today, and also as a kind of an aide-memoir, so that when we finish today, you've got something you can take away, something to help you remember what we covered. Now, it's not a full manual. It's not the full manual that I give away to my subscribers every month, because I have a website where users come along and they have a full manual each month. This is just a shortened version. So I've taken about half of it away. So I've taken, some people might say, oh, you've taken away all the good stuff. I'm sorry about that, but I've got to keep a little bit back. But I wanted to give you something. So this is the little takeaway, and it's called project sharing. This is what we did last month. So if we have a look at the handout that I've given you, I wanted to talk to you about why we're going to use project sharing. And the idea of project sharing or referencing or working with other people really is that sometimes you've got a project, it might be a tight deadline, it might be a large project, so you need to give somebody else some work to do. So the easiest way to do it is to find a way that you can separate the project so that you do some of the work and somebody else does the other work. For example, why not give someone all the details to do? You might find the details can be drawn by another person. You can then carry on working with the plan sections and elevations. Now, the other thing is I might use the word architect here, but actually everything we're covering will relate to set designers, architects, landscape designers, engineers, and so on. It's not just limited to architects. So if we think about it, what we could do is we've got a concept in Vectorworks called referencing, and referencing allows us to share files in a live way. So for example, one of the techniques that Vectorworks has is the ability to reference layers from another file. So you could be doing the plans, you could reference your plans to someone that might be doing sections and elevations, and you might still have the other person doing the details. So the idea of the concept of referencing came before the concept of project sharing. But I still think that referencing is part of setting up a project for sharing. It's just one of the techniques we've got. Now this works very well on some smaller projects. It works very well on some specific types of projects. But if the project gets very large, what you find is that you start to have references all over the place. You start having lots of designers working on lots of different files, trying to share information with each other. And hopefully, Barbara, you can see from all those arrows, it starts to get a little complicated and just a bit messy. And that's where project sharing starts to really come into it. Now, project sharing is a special technique in Vectorworks where we share a project with other people. The concept of project sharing is that you create something called a project file, and the project file sits on a server. At the moment, it has to sit on either the network that you're working on or a virtual personal network. We were told at the Vectorworks Design Summit in April that it's going to be cloud aware. So we'll be able to put our project file on the cloud and use cloud sharing like Dropbox, Box, is it OneNote, one of the Google ones as well. We'll be able to use some of those cloud techniques to share our project, which is going to be really fantastic. But the concept is that we have this thing called a project file, which we will not be working on exactly. When you want to open up the project file, Vectorworks will create something called a working file. So the working file is a copy of the project file which is designed to link with the project file, and the working file is owned by a specific user. It is actually tied to your username when you log into your computer. So that becomes your file, which you will store locally. The project file will be stored centrally, and you will work on that file, and when you're ready to save the changes to the project file, you'll carry out a command called commit. And when you commit the changes are then uploaded to the project file, which then becomes the latest version of the file. Other people working, so person number 2 and person number 3, they will see a little notification that the project file has been updated, and they can refresh their work and download the latest copy or the latest changes to the project file. But before we go too far, let's talk about the concept of referencing. We've got a master file, we're going to bring some source information in, and you might think, well, now we've got project sharing, surely we don't need references at all. Well, you might think that, but there are some things that are still quite handy for referencing. For example, you can reference image files. Now you might be working with someone like an urban designer, you might be doing something in that world. So let's have a look at Vectorworks, and I've got some files here that I want to show you. So I've got a file here which is an image of a city. So I'll drag that into Vectorworks, and I can drag and drop import into Vectorworks. And you may not have noticed, but down the bottom here we've got the concept of reference. So I can reference that image file into Vectorworks. Why would you want to do that? Well, what if somebody else is actually updating this file as you're working? They might be putting marks on here, they might be putting arrows. So let's open that file up in my computer. Should open in Photoshop. Now I'm going to make some changes. So I'm going to paint some lines on here. Let's put a circle. We want people to see what we're doing here. We don't want to miss where the changes are. So I make changes to that file, save it. Now I go back to Vectorworks. So when I get back to Vectorworks, what do I see? Well, at the moment I don't see any changes. This is my navigation palette, so I've got layers, classes, sheet layers, save views, and down the bottom I've got references. And you might notice that my reference is now shown in red. Previously it was shown in black. And it also says the status is out of date. Right click, let's update that, and there are my changes. So referencing is a great way where somebody else is doing something different. Referencing can be an image file, a PDF, or a DXF file. And the idea is that every time you open the file, Vectorworks will refresh that reference, and you will be getting the latest information. So if you've got somebody else helping you out on a large project, they might be putting colors on this, they might be doing all kinds of stuff. This is a great way of working with another person, and it's not strictly speaking a Vectorworks file. So what happens when we make a change? So I'm going to go back to my Photoshop. I'm going to undo those changes. So I'm just going to use my history and just undo them. Save that file again, and we'll go back to Vectorworks and we'll refresh that. Now this time it doesn't say that it's out of date because I did the undo. And I'm going to refresh it or update it. And you can see that information is now gone. So we don't need that. I've got some other files here. So that was an image file. I've also got a staircase drawing. So let's bring that staircase drawing into Vectorworks. Drag and drop again. And again, we've got this ability to reference it. So we import a DXF file. Sorry, we're importing a PDF file. There it is there. It has no crop. We could snap to the geometry as well if we wanted to. Don't forget that if you need to snap to the geometry. Now I'm going to rotate this because I don't like its location at the moment. It's upside down, so I'm going to turn it around. I just want to reference in a small part of it. I just need to undo that. I did one too many. There we are. And I'm going to crop that, so right click, we're going to crop that, and we just want a small part of that. And we'll exit our PDF. So that allows you to crop that, and it still is a referenced object. So if anything changes with that PDF file, if I get a revised PDF file from the engineer, if I put that into the same location and with the same name, then Vectorworks will update that for me automatically. If at any point you lose your reference, you can right-click, choose Edit, and you can find a different reference file, if you like. So you can browse to a completely different file. Now I've got that on my desktop, original drawings. There's a different one there, I think. It's only very slightly different. But it just shows you that these are quite powerful, these references, allowing you to still work with other people, still work with different information. One of the things that, and there's my changes there, so it was quite a different file. One of the things that you might do is have some person working on all the notes for your drawings. So the reference PDF I've done in the past where somebody else has created a whole page of general notes, but they haven't finished, but I need those general notes in my file. What about referencing that now and then keeping that reference up to date as they keep updating their notes and generating the PDF for you? So that becomes quite a useful technique. So we looked at referencing files. I'm just going to work through here so I make sure I didn't forget anything. So we've done that. Referencing PDFs. Okay, referencing DWG DXF files. So when I go to import a DXF or a DWG file, I can import that DWG DXF file directly, but also I can reference it. So let's reference this file, and I'm pretty sure I got the right units and coordinates, but it's important that you check those. Okay, so there is my imported DXF or DWG file. And you might notice just up here it actually says DWG referenced. So like the PDF, like the image file, if I get a revised DWG and it has the same name and I put it in the same location and overwrite the old one, then I will, next time I open the file, I will get the latest information imported into my Vectorworks. So this is a great way of sharing, of working like a project sharing with someone who's generating DWGs or DXF files. So don't underestimate that. I think that's a really powerful technique. So let's just have a look. So I talked about that, working with DWGs, DXFs. So I often think of that as maybe in a landscape type project where you're getting information from a consultant like an architect, and the information might keep changing over the course of the project so that you need to keep up to date. Let's look at the concept of project sharing again. So I've said to you before that what happens is you end up with a project file, and the project file sits on a server and shares to other people. Now, one of the problems with referencing has been that when you reference information, let's just go back to the differences between referencing. And this particular image here you might notice, Barbara, that I've got a single arrow with an arrowhead only at one end. And what that means is that the information from this DXF file is only going in one direction. If we go back up to one of these earlier sketches I did, again here, you will notice that there's an arrow that goes in one direction. It's only got an arrowhead at one end. The information does not flow in two directions. When we talk about a project file, you'll notice that I've put arrowheads at each end of my arrow because the information does indeed flow in both directions. So here we are, project file. This user, number 1, they want to work on the downstairs, the level 1 or the basement of this project. So what happens is the user opens a copy of the project file, and as soon as they try to open a copy of the project file, they are created a working file. The working file is linked to the project file. The user then checks out, is the description we use. They check out a layer. Once they check out a layer, like going to a library and checking out a book, once they check out the layer, nobody else can work on that layer. Other people can see it, but no one else can work on it. So user number 2 comes along and they want to work on part of the project, so they have to check out another layer. User number 3 comes along and they check out a different layer again. So, is there a problem with management here? Well, there is actually. If you think about it, user number 1's got one layer, user number 2's got a different layer, user number 3 has a different layer. What if we have a stair that goes between layer 1 and layer 2, or level 1 and level 2? In order to edit the stair, you need access to both levels of the building. So what happens? You have to ask user 2 who's working on that floor to save and commit their work to release that layer so that you can make the changes. So just before we move on, Barbara, are there any questions about the concept of project sharing yet?
Yes, there's a couple. Can you control layers and classes in a reference DWG file?
Yes. Well, the answer is you're not controlling them in the reference DWG file. You're controlling them in the result that arrives. So let's go back to Vectorworks. If you have a look at the DWG, it's a referenced DWG, and it appears like a design layer viewport. So you can actually choose what layers, and you choose what classes you want to see. So I could turn off bits that I don't want to see. Now, I haven't tried it, but I might be able to use my visibility tool to turn off some of the classes as well. So there's some information there. There's some information there. I may have turned off a bit too much. So yes, you can. So not in the DWG, but in the reference part of it. So once it's referenced into Vectorworks, yes, then you can control it quite happily.
Wonderful.
Are there any other questions?
Yes. If we use file referencing a lot, there would be so many external documents to organize. Any tips to simplify this?
Keep it simple. Yeah, well, the tips that I've got aren't related to Vectorworks, but they're really related to office management. For example, if they're referencing, why not have a folder for them? So you might get a file from an engineer like this one, or a roading engineer. Why not take a copy of that file, put it into a special folder that's close to the work that you're doing, and give it a special name, so that it's referenced.
Okay.
So that it's easy to locate. So then when you get another file from the engineer, again, copy it back to that person, copy it back to that folder.
Yes, and there's a similar question about, simplification, because this attendee says, file sharing seems to have quite some bugs, and so they actually experience some of these problems, and they're asking how to simplify the sharing system.
Okay. There are a few techniques that you've got to get used to with project sharing. So let's have a look at the concept that we were looking at before. So part of this, you might think, some people might call it a bug. the way project sharing is designed, but you remember that it's designed to work in a specific way, and you've really got to work with it, not fight against it. So with project sharing, the technique is to make sure that you've got a well thought out layer strategy. So part of the problem is management, not to do with Vectorworks as much. So the question is, who is responsible for which parts of the building? So if you were putting in doors and windows, and you wanted one person to be in charge of all the door and window design, and another person to be in charge of where all the walls are, that would be difficult, because windows and doors sit inside a wall, and now you've got two people trying to work on the same file or in the same area of that working file. And that to me is a challenge. It would be easier if you said to someone, okay, you're in charge of all the ceilings. Another person, you're in charge of all the floors. Another person, you're in charge of the walls and columns or the shell of the building. Another person, you're in charge of all the furniture. Because those things are nice and easy to put on separate layers, and if you put them on separate layers, they're very easy for the working file to check out and modify without affecting other people. But sure, like the stair example I gave, Barbara, it's a bit of a challenge where the stair goes between two floors. You need access to both floors in order to make those changes.
I see. I hope this will help, really. And one more question. When will the cloud-enabled version be available? Do you have any insight?
When they upgrade Vectorworks 2017. At the moment, you guys know as much information as I know.
All right.
I don't know when it comes out. Anyone got a guess on when it's coming out? Let me know, because historically you can go back through time and figure out when they released new versions of Vectorworks. I think it's about the same time they bring out new car models in America. I don't know why, but
yeah,
that's my guess.
Okay.
So we can now go ahead and actually set up a project for file sharing if you like.
Yeah.
So I've got a file already here. Step 15, this is the file I use for my architect tutorial manual. And the first step is to make sure you save your project file somewhere. Now, before we get started too far, let's have a look. Have I structured this correctly using layers and classes? Because the last thing you want to do is to start I was going to use a local term here, a badly organized file, Barbara. You don't want to start with a badly organized file and then start sharing it. You want to make sure that you're using stories, that you're using levels, that you're using wall styles, and using, good resources. It should not be a free-for-all. Before you start project sharing, somebody should have looked at the file, looked at the project, and calculated how many drawings are required and who's going to be responsible for which parts of the drawing. If you don't manage your work, I'm not sure how you actually manage to get your projects completed on time, because it shouldn't be a free-for-all. It should be a very carefully managed system. Someone's responsible for the roofing, someone's responsible for the framing. In the large commercial projects that I've worked in, somebody's been responsible for the exterior of the building. Somebody's been responsible for all the floor finishes. Someone's been responsible for all of the ceilings. And if you divide it up that way, then it's a lot easier to manage the whole process. So step number one, make sure that you have saved your file and structured it. Step number two, save that file into a location that other people can get access to. So I'm going to put this on my desktop. If I can find it, there's my desktop. I'm going to put it in project sharing, and I'm going to call it step 15. So that's the first thing, is to make sure you've got it in the right location. No questions yet, Barbara?
Nope, we're all, pay very good attention. And
cool. We're all ears, as they say.
Yeah, we're all ears.
So next thing, we're going to make this into a shared project. So you choose project sharing, and now this is warning. Oh, wait a minute, if you share this document, it'll be converted into a shareable project file. The document will be saved as a VWXP file and automatically close at the end of the session. Once that happens, you will be given a working file. So once you go through this process, never again will that file be a regular Vectorworks file. Now you can open up a project file and save as, and convert it back to a regular Vectorworks file if you want. But once you start going down the track of making it a project file, it is always going to be a project file from then on. Every time you try to open the project file, you will end up with a copy, you will end up with your own working file. Now some people don't like that and they want to open up the project file and do stuff to it, but I don't understand why. Because if you open up a working file and do stuff to it, as soon as you commit, it goes into the project file anyway. So I don't understand why people would want to open up that. But anyway, it's not my choice, but this is the way it's been designed. You have a project file and you have working files, and the working files give their information to the project file, and the project file is the most up-to-date version there is. Let's go next. So we have the ability to add users, or users can be allowed to add themselves just by opening it. And users who are not specifically listed here, and there's only me at the moment, they will be given the default permissions. So what are the permissions? Well, the permissions run all the way from the administrator, who can change absolutely everything in the file, all the way down to a user who can only open the file and look at it. So we've got an administrator can do absolutely everything, including releasing layers that other users are working on. A project file can't do that. A project user can do almost everything except for releasing work that other people are doing and removing users. Layers and resources allows people to create layers to create resources. Layers unrestricted people can create layers, can change everything on layers, but they're restricted in what resources they can build. And restricted layers, they can't change layers. So they can't create new layers, they can't delete layers, and read-only, they can only read it. So now we're into a situation, Barbara, where it's another management issue where you start saying, okay, well, I've got some people who are really, really good on this project. I want them to be maybe administrators, because it's probably a good idea to have at least 2 people as administrators, just in case one of them's sick or one of them's, on site. People who are really good on the project, you can make them project, but you might have a whole lot of, I don't know what the expression is, interns or juniors working on the project. Actually, you don't want them to be building new hatches all the time. So you want to restrict what they're doing. You want to restrict them to just work in the area that you trust them to work in. And I always joke and say maybe if it's your boss, you should make it read-only just so he doesn't mess around too much, but he can still read everything. I've had an employer who used to move stuff around so they could see what was underneath it. The file would be a nightmare at the end in the next morning. So you've got this choice over administrators, over what permissions people have.
And Jonathan, the drawing administrator can work an add-on project file as well, right?
No.
No, okay. That was a question that just popped up.
Okay, well, sorry. Not even the administrator can open the project file. They end up with their own working file. But again, I don't understand the logic of wanting to open up the project file, because a working file is a perfect copy. Every time you commit, it sends the work to the project file anyway. So if you create new symbols and you then commit the changes, those symbols will be in the project file anyway. So there's nothing you need to do in the project file.
And is it possible to manage the permission per layer?
I don't think so.
Okay. Who controls?
So it's a general thing. Oh, sorry, yes. Wait a minute. Let me.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a subtlety to this. Okay, so let's go next. Okay, so I hadn't thought of phrasing it that way, Barbara. That's the reason I said no. But there is. So people who have got administrative or project privileges, they're the only ones who can change these particular layers. So anything that's a master layer, you make them a master layer by clicking where the little star is. You need to have project or administrative permissions to edit those layers. If you've got layers unrestricted, you can't edit that layer. You can't change anything on that layer. So be careful about making these master layers. Things like the building grid, I don't have a building grid on this project, but if I had a building grid, that to me would certainly be a master layer. I don't want anyone else changing stuff on that particular layer.
Okay. Who
Does that
controls
answer the
stories?
question?
I think so. Who controls stories?
The administrator or project can change stories.
Okay, that was it.
But again, be careful. You've got different layers of access. So if you gave everybody project sharing abilities, project privileges, that means that everybody in the project can change stories. So you might want to limit some people's use of the file to some of those restricted uses. You know, layers restricted. You know, they can't change stories, they can't change layer names, they can't create resources because you want to limit what people are doing. But if you limit some people in their ability to create resources like hatches or line styles, then you've got to make sure that your project is properly structured and that those things are there when people need them. This is a management problem. And so this will create a backup. You can save the last 5 backups. And are there any questions about this, Barbara? Because when I click finish, we will come back to the file. We won't see this dialog
Okay, now
box.
there's one more question. If you have organized a file with everything that will be a part of this working file, save it as a project file, but then forget a sheet. Can the administrator update the project file with this new sheet?
Yeah, even the project person can.
Cool.
So any changes that a user makes to a working file, or when they commit those changes, they are sent to the project file. So let's go back a little bit, Barbara.
I have one more question, though. Can you?
I'll just finish this one about
finish
I
that.
think
Okay.
I think there's a conceptual understanding here. So that if user number 1 has project or administration privileges, they can edit anything on the design layers and they can edit anything on the sheet layers, and they can create their own sheets and they can send those to the project file. I hope that clears it up. What's the last question?
Yes, that was very visually clear. Can you differentiate permissions from person to person? For instance, can one user have more permissions than another if both are not administrators? Yes?
Well, there's that whole range of, can I go back? There's that whole range of abilities. So as I said, maybe you have a couple of administrators, maybe have some people that are project, and you might have some people that have got unrestricted or even restricted controls over them. If you want to know what all these are, there's a Vectorworks help that will actually list all of the options that these people have got. Let's finish and we'll go to help. And OK on that. So I've got no layers checked out yet. So if we go to help, Vectorworks help, and I sometimes use what's this, which is kind of cool, because then you can go project sharing. Okay, so what I'm looking here is the privileges. Here they are. So they start at the read only. So what can they do? They can publish and export, they can edit a class and layer visibilities, they can't commit those changes. So you could have some people on layers restricted, so they can create, edit and delete objects on a layer, they can create worksheets, they can change settings, but they can't create layers. An unrestricted layers person can create, edit and delete layers. A project person can create, edit and delete story data, but nobody else can. So the question, Barbara, is not can you do it per layer, the question is do you do it by person? So some people have the ability to create stories, other people don't, like layers and resources. These people can't change story data.
Yeah, that's
perfect. But a
perfect.
project user can. So you've got to make sure that when if you've got a large team, I used to work on teams that had, 11, 20 people, some of these teams. You're going to have some people that you want to restrict their use. You want to have some people you're going to say, I'm sorry, but you're a restricted only. I want you to, not that I don't trust you, but we can't have everybody have unrestricted access, so you've got restricted access. So make sure you understand these settings. Now, did anyone have a question about how I got here so quickly, Barbara? Would that Vectorworks help?
No, I think that was clear. But there's
this? It's a really cool trick where you just click on something that brings up the help for that.
Yeah. Does this system have a method of tracking changes per user?
Yes, it does. Has history. Now the history is empty at the moment because I haven't done anything. So I need to check out some layers. So I want to check out floor 1. Let's check that out. So I've chosen floor 1. I'm going to check that out so that I'm going to be able to use it because I need to update the stairs. So let's update stairs. All right, so it knows it's me and it knows I'm going to check out and it knows I'm updating the stairs now. So before we go too far, Barbara, I'd just like everyone everyone's attention at the top of the screen here where it's got Vectorworks Designer 2016. There's my file name, step 15, and it's put my username at the end of it, Jonathan. Now when I access the same file from my Macintosh, my username on my Macintosh is different. So it'll give a slightly different name here. And that it's a VWXW, it's a working file. It actually says it right there, working file. So now I have access to floor 1, and floor 1 is now in blue, just here. Floor 2 is my active file, or my active layer. So did I say layer? Floor 1 is my checked out layer, because it's blue. Floor 2 is my active layer, that's in bold. So now I can make changes to that floor there. So let's get back to this one. So if I go back up to the next floor up, floor 2, let's just make sure we're not confused and we'll just go active only. So that's floor 2. And I don't want that table, let's delete it. Wait a minute, you can't delete this because you haven't checked it out. Do you want to check them out? Actually, no, someone else is responsible for that. So what I'd like to do now, Barbara, you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm going to go to my other computer and I'm going to open a copy of that file. I need to find that file, so I'm going to go open. Now you can't see this, so I just have to narrate what I'm doing.
It's all right, we trust you.
Now I checked it all, of course, before I did any of this, and now it's going to go slow. Users. Okay, so I've got to find that file that I created. I think I put it on my desktop, so it should be easy for me to find. Desktop, and it was called project sharing, and it was step 15. So when I look at it on my computer over here, I actually see that file, but I see step 15 VWXP, the project file. I can also see the other file up, but I'm going to open up the project file. And when I open up the project file, I'm going to check out floor 2. So select the layers you want to check out. I'm going to check out floor 2, and it says I don't have permission to do this because I have restricted levels. I've got restricted permissions. Oh, so I have to come back to the administrator and say, you know, Jonathan, you kind of didn't give me what I need. And so what I'm going to have to find is there's this other Jonathan who's only got read-only permissions. Well, that's not going to allow him to do any work. So let's edit that, and we'll change his permissions to project. Okay, so that should allow me on the other computer to access that. Let's try that again. So I'm going to check out, so go back to my project settings, I'm going to check out floor 2. and let's see what happens. So I've written a note. I'm another user over there. So let's go back to the downstairs. I need to access the stair because I want to move it. Now the stair goes between two floors, which means I need to have both floors. I need to have access to both floors. Whoa, wait a minute. I'm not allowed to change it because this one needs to access more than one layer and the other guy's got it. And I can't release it because he's working in it. But I am the administrator. So what I should be able to do is I should be able to go to my project setting. I should be able to click on floor 2 and say, okay, I want him to release it. You notice he says, I have the stair. So let's release that. Now wait a minute. I've got permission to release these, but the other Jonathan, they're going to lose their work unless they commit it. And I'm going to release it anyway. So now I can move the stair and I've got access to both when I choose that. So now I've got freedom to move that stair around and to do whatever I want to it. And then when I'm finished, I can release those layers. So I can close and release. I can save and commit. And I go to my project sharing and release them. So what does that mean? What happens when we save a file? Well, when we save this file, so let's save, because I've got this working file here, I'm going to save it. I'm going to put it on my desktop, which I put desktop, we don't call it project sharing. Let's save it there, and you can see I don't think I've saved it from my other computer. Okay, so I've saved my changes in my working file, but I haven't committed them. I haven't saved my changes to the project file. So is this likely to happen to people? Yeah, it is. If they don't save and commit their work, then it won't get to the project file, and if it doesn't get to the project file, it won't get to the other users. Now, some people tick this and say, don't show that again. So if they don't show this dialog again, there'll be no reminder that they haven't committed their changes. So some people say, well, Vectorworks never warned me that I hadn't saved my changes. Well, it tried to, but you told it not to. So it's your fault.
That's a great tip.
So the trick is you save and commit. So this is actually going to update the stairs, and it's going to move the stairs on the project file, and any resources that I've made to do this will be saved as well. So I've committed my changes to the project file, but I still have exclusive access to the layers that I've checked out. Again, you can choose not to show this dialog box again. But if you do choose to not see it, then don't be upset if you forget to do something. So project sharing, I can release those. Now somebody else can check those out and work on them. And now we should see some history.
Yep.
So now we can see what people have done, who's done what. Jonathan had this, I did that.
Jonathan, is it possible to check out one more layer, more than one layer at the same time? Oh yes, I guess you just answered that. Yeah.
Okay, so you just make sure you leave a comment. Sorry, I was just being a bit silly there.
Yeah.
And so you can check out as many as you want. And remember, you need to release them. So check them all out, grab them all, release them. Okay, so on the other computer, Barbara, I need to make some changes. So I'm going to go to the other computer. I'm going to make a change to the roof. I'm just going to delete a roof. I'm going to check it out. And I'm going to save my changes. And I'm going to save them locally. So the idea is that you don't need to save your working files on the server. you can save them to your local computer, because as soon as you save and commit, any changes you did on your local file have been saved to the server anyway. Okay, so Barbara, on my screen, I don't know if you saw it, a tiny little yellow button just arrived, a tiny little warning thing just here. That's the refresh, and that means that this file has been updated. If we go to project sharing, we might be able to see what's happened. Somebody has edited the roof. Jonathan Pickup, he says, I have the roof, and he's edited it. There's the warning there. And I can refresh, but before I do that, let's go and have a look at the roof. When I refresh, part of the roof should vanish.
Ah.
So if Jonathan then, so I've still got access to those, let's just undo what I've done. I put it back. I should really put it back, but it looks like, okay, once you've saved and committed your changes, you do not have an undo anymore, so you can't undo what you've done. So if you deleted something major, you can't undo it once you've committed. Now, one of the things that somebody raised, Barbara, was that we've got here project sharing, save and commit, close and release. Close and release will release my layers and close my file. But they're actually, most people go save or save as and forget that these are down here. So what some people have done, or what some people have suggested, is that they change those. I think this might be this one here, project sharing. Change the location of those save and commits, Barbara. And so you can see here I'll put save and commit, and I've moved it from project sharing up to here, and I've also given it a keyboard shortcut which allows me to save and commit my work in an easy way, so that I don't just save my work and then forget to commit it. So if you don't commit your work to the project file, none of your changes make it to the project file.
That's a great tip. Write that down. So Jonathan, what if your file size is too large for all of your computers to handle? Can you have multiple project files for one project?
And reference. And then you could reference them together.
Okay.
But how large is too large for your computers? Because I regularly work on projects that are over 100 megabytes.
Okay, well, we'll see what they say. How large is too large?
And someone gave me a project that was 2 gigabytes that they were working on. That I thought was too large. But one of the reasons that project was too large was they used lots of groups instead of symbols. Now, so it depends on how much you want to put together. So if you've got a project, I've got a client I'm going to train shortly, and they tend to do a lot of resort type work. So they've got a large site, massive site, with lots of little buildings on it, lots of little houses, like a villa. So it's it's a holiday resort, and it's got these little self-contained rooms. So they've got like a bedroom, a lounge, and a bathroom. Tiny little buildings, but there's lots of them on the site. So what's the best way to divide those up? Well, you could use project sharing, I suppose, but from my experience, it would be much better to reference those projects to the site plan. So the site plan would use referencing rather than project sharing. Each villa type could be designed by a separate person. It could be totally controlled by that person, so that they can do the plan sections, elevations, have total control over the layer heights, over the windows and doors, and then they reference that entire design to the site plan, because that would allow the site plan designer to rotate each house to suit the road design, to lift each design layer viewport or each referenced viewport so it was at the correct height for the site. It would be much better to do it that way. So just because we have project sharing doesn't mean that project referencing or reference files are no longer needed. you really have to make sure you choose the right technique for the type of project you're doing.
Cool. Yes, Matthew is saying, so we split up the files for plans, elevation sections, etc. And he also says that one file can be up to 200 megabytes and their computer would freeze before saving. That was the issue.
Yeah, it sounds like the computer thing needs a little bit of technical support. So make sure you've got enough memory, make sure you've got the right graphics card, make sure your graphics drivers are up to date, and make sure your network is a good network, that you're not saving over you're not running a project like that over a wireless network, which would be, I think, a disaster.
I hope that helps, Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew, it depends on the scale of the project, how big it is. And it might be that you need to divide the project up even more, so that the walls are on one layer, the ceilings are on another layer, the floors are on a separate layer, maybe even a separate file, so that you can then bring all that work back together later to assemble your drawings.
Yes. And how do you reference a file?
Well, there's two ways to do it. We can use, how are we getting on for time? I'm not sure I'm going to have time to describe that as well as everything else. But one of the ways of doing it is when you create a viewport, you can choose to, let's put a viewport on my site plan. Here, where it says select source, you can actually choose the source document. And then you can choose what layers you want to have, and that will create a reference. There's another way to do it where you can set up layer references. So you've got to choose when you're referencing these together. Do you want your reference to be self-contained, like the DWG reference, or do you want to reference an entire layer? For the project that I was talking to Matthew about, then I think you need to use layer referencing rather than a design layer viewport type reference. And that is done somewhere differently. References and settings. And here you choose layer import, so that you can then choose to import a whole layer from another project. So then you click new, you choose the file you want to use. I better not use that one. I need to find a different one. I don't have one set up to show you, but what you can do is you can then click on the new button, find the file you want, and you can choose which layers you want to bring in. Any other questions, Barbara?
No, we're good.
Okay. Well, I think that probably covers all that I wanted to talk about. So for those of you that were subscribers to my website, don't forget to go and get the full version of this manual that I've given you, the handout. There was a full version. It will have movies included in it. And I presented this a month ago, I don't know if Ramon's here. I think Ramon was at my subscription presentation. I'm sure there are other users that are there. I recorded all my monthly sessions, so if you came to those sessions, you want to see where they are, go to my website and have a look, because I recorded the session, and this month I'm doing, I've forgotten what I'm doing already, I only did it last night. We're doing Enagos. So I've written another manual this month to cover Enagos, and this month we're going through how to set up a project for Enagos, and I've written a manual for that as well. Which I might have here to show you. Yeah, here it is here. So this is my Enagos manual that I wrote this week, and this is what we're going through. And there's one more session this after in about 3 hours time, 2 hours time, I think. There's another session where I'm going to go through this, and I record those sessions, and they're on my website for my subscribers.
Yeah, check it out. Right, archoncad.com. Is that right?
archoncad.com. Let's have a look.
Right. Yeah. Another question popped in. Do you want to take it? Just
yeah.
Okay. What if you have a curtain wall that spans multiple stories?
Same problems if you've got a multiple. The idea that it's project sharing doesn't matter whether it's a single. It doesn't matter. It's still a challenge in Vectorworks because of the layer structure. But if you've got a curtain wall that spans more than one story, what about creating a separate layer for that curtain wall and draw that curtain wall on a separate layer so that can span 2 stories or 3 stories or whatever.
Cool. Great. I'm just taking a look at your website. Looks great.
It looks lovely, and I've got
Yeah.
this new website that I've created, my store. Lots of people that want to go to, want to learn more. Some people don't like reading manuals. You know, Barbara, you sell my manuals. I write a long manual. Some people don't like that. So what I've got are some courses, and these courses are movie-based courses. So it's like having one of those manuals, but all you've got are the movies, and you just go through lecture by lecture or session by session, working your way through 3D modeling, through essentials, my landmark manuals there, or my updated essentials and architect courses.
You know, Jonathan, some people just, don't want to read the book. They just like to wait for the movies. And
Well, that's one of the reasons I did this, was, as you say, I think you said to me the other day that there are lots of people that don't want to read. So what they want to do is they want to see where the movie, they just want to follow the movies. So this is a movie-based course which goes through all the stuff that you need. It goes through in a nice structured way, so you're not just learning from people at random. You're actually, there's a curriculum here, and you can see you gradually work your way through all the really important parts of Vectorworks. Modeling and drawing, annotation, that's just my essential course. So.
Great. I
thank you very much.
thank you. I thank you. I think this was a priceless webinar with lots of tips and tricks, and I know a lot of you can wait to get on project sharing and be really efficient with your teams. I'm going to take the screen back, and I'm gonna wrap it up just by saying thanking you for attending, and then also I would like to remind you about our website, novedge.com, where you can find all the software tools that Jonathan just mentioned. There's 2 great specials for this month, so go on our Orange tab with the promotions and check out, you can get a free copy of Bluebeam Review with a brand new purchase if you're new users of Vectorworks and you buy a license, and you get your upgrade for 50% off. Just check it out and take advantage of it. Novedge is the best way to buy design software online. And also, just, for other specials or new releases, follow us on Google+, Twitter, Facebook. And next week webinar is about simulations on the cloud. And to watch today's webinar, because I know you can never have enough, just visit our Novedge YouTube and Vimeo channels. Our webinar playlist has webinars for every software taste. Thanks again for joining us today. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Barbara. Well, it's tomorrow here. It's early in the morning. There was just one thing I wanted to say, Barbara, and that is that I've only had a chance to sort of touch briefly on this project sharing thing. But if people really want my help, I've got loads of clients who I use me for support. If people want to get in touch and use me, I use this sort of online sharing system all the time, this webinar type system, that I can actually join into people's offices and I can, provide almost face-to-face help.
That's great news.
Just go through my website, archoncad.com.
Yes, and I know it's true. I know you're, 100% for your customer. So we know how you work. You know. And you've proved it today.
Thank you, Barbara.
Bye, Jonathan. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.